Okay, so in this video we're going to explore some of the deeper structures within the cerebral hemisphere. So earlier we talked about how there's gray matter in the cortex of the cerebral hemispheres. Now we understand though that white matter is found deeper because of the fact that all these neurons in the cortex, they intercommunicate with each other in local and kind of long-range areas. Now it's second of the three basic regions of the hemispheres and responsible for communication between the cerebral areas, so that this white matter is found between the cortex and lower central nervous system structure, so it serves as a nice intermediary between the two. Now, it's white matter because it's made of mostly myelinated fibers that are bundled into large tracts, and these tracts are named for the directions that they run in the hemispheres. So association tracts run horizontal and they connect different parts of the same hemisphere. Commissural tracts are horizontal fibers that connect gray matter of two different hemispheres. So commissural fibers go across the right and left, or left and right cerebral hemispheres. And then projection fibers are vertical fibers that connect hemispheres with lower brain regions, or send information from lower brain regions to the cortex. Now, the internal capsule is a projection of fibers on each side of the brainstem that form a compact band, and this passes between the thalamus and some of the basal nuclei. We have something called corona radiata, which are projection fibers that radiate through the cerebral white matter of the cortex. So if you look here at this cross-section, we find that, okay, so on the outer surface of the brain, you see a lot of gray matter here, and then white matter is found deeper. Now, if we applied stains and followed these axons in terms of their direction, we could come up with this sort of diagram where shown in green are the commissural fibers because they go side to side and they connect across cerebral hemispheres. In fact, this type of commissure is called Corpus Callosum, which means colossal body. So it's a gigantic network of axons that connect the right and left cerebral hemispheres together. Shown in pink here are the association fibers that help to connect nearby brain regions, and in purple are the projection fibers that help to have the cortex communicate with deeper brain regions like the basal nuclei or even parts of the brainstem. Now, the association fibers you can see here forming these little nearby localized associations between different gyri and areas of the cortex. We can see commissural fibers here, which would be horizontal, going across the hemispheres, as well as the projection fibers that would go from deeper to superior brain regions. And you can see the corona radiata internal capsule here, where corona radiata are these projection fibers that are going up or radiating out towards the cortex. And you can see the internal capsule here, which would be made of more of also projection fibers that are at an angle, and these would be helping to transmit information from like the thalamus, to more superior brain regions. Now, it's important to note too that corona radiata is also made of association fibers. So although it looks like these fibers are going, at a radiating kind of oblique angle, if you really look closely, you'd see that some of these actually would go side to side as well. And this occurs even at a microscopic level. Now, if we look deeper in the cerebral hemispheres, we have these groups of gray matter called the basal nuclei, also called the basal ganglia. Now, this is the third of the three basic regions of the cerebrum, and each hemisphere's basal nucleus includes the caudate, the putamen, and the globus pallidus. Now, the globus pallidus is made of the caudate and the putamen make something called the striatum. Now, the basal nuclei are very closely associated with the subthalamic nuclei, like of the diencephalon, as well as the substantia nigra of your midbrain, because these are involved with basically movement. So if you looked here deep within the cerebral hemisphere, we can see our striatum, which we can have our caudate and our putamen, as well as our thalamus deep to that. And over here we have the tail of the caudate nucleus. Now, near the tail of the caudate nucleus, over nearby, we'd find something called the hippocampus. And the hippocampus would just be internal to this. Hippocampus is actually part of the temporal lobe. And then the very tip of that would be another region called the amygdala, which is involved with emotional processing. Now, the functions of the basal nuclei are involved with muscle movements, cognition and emotion, regulating the intensity of stereotype movements, as well as filtering out incorrect or inappropriate responses. They can also inhibit antagonistic or unnecessary movements. So if these were damaged, like in Parkinson's disease and Huntington's, you'd find that these would be movement disorders. So with Parkinson's disease, we see difficulty with filtering out unnecessary movements, ones that are inappropriate, so that you have this sort of resting tremor. And then Huntington's disease is also a difficulty with filtering out incorrect or inappropriate responses or movements, because they actually will just kind of move randomly as they try to move their body around in a very deliberate way. Now, if you took a cross-section through the cerebral hemisphere, you'd find, okay, out here we have the cortex, which is the first part of the cerebral hemisphere. You have your white matter, which is deeper. That's the second part. And then you find your ventricles, which are even deeper. And then nearby the ventricles, these would be the basal nuclei, or basal ganglia. So you can see things like your putamen, globus pallidus, head of the caudate nucleus, the tail of the caudate nucleus, as well as your thalamus, which is not part of the cerebrum, actually. Thalamus is part of the diencephalon. But these show the basal ganglia. In fact, it's an important type of brain scanning sectional view here, where certain diseases like multiple sclerosis show deficits in the size of things like your caudate nucleus and putamen, which explains some of the movement difficulties that those individuals would have.